Good morning, Dr. Jessica Suagee. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate in our Scientific Journey video project where we are interviewing successful scientists like yourself in order to discuss the different paths individuals take in order to attain their scientific careers. So, Dr. Suagee, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Great. Well, I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland, and then I stuck around for a master's degree in animal science. My undergrad was in human nutrition, and I originally had an interest in actually going to medical school. And then I fell in love with science and decided to continue my education in research. So I stuck around Maryland for another 2 years at a master's degree, and then I came down to Virginia Tech to do a PhD, again in animal science. I probably wasn't convinced until maybe the end of my master's degree that I wanted to pursue a PhD, but then I finally decided that that's what I wanted to do. So human nutrition, animal nutrition, equine nutrition is kind of my focus, and now I love what I do. So.
And what you're doing right now? Where are you currently? What's your position here at Virginia Tech?
Right now I'm a postdoc, and I work with, mostly my job right now is to supervise 3 master's students, and they are actually in swine or pig physiology. They do heat stress research. So my job is to kind of coach them through the process of being a master's student and how to survive their first semester, which I love.
Well, give us some of that advice here as well. That's the kind of information that we're definitely looking for. Can you go a little bit farther back and tell me a little bit about your background before going to undergrad, and you said Maryland?
Yeah. Well, I'm an American Indian, so I'm a minority of all minorities. So I actually was born on an Indian reservation, and then my parents moved from the reservation to the Washington, D.C. area. They both work in Washington, D.C. So I grew up in Maryland, just outside of the city lines, and I went to high school at Eleanor Roosevelt, and I was in the science and tech program. So we did, probably the one thing that kind of first focused me towards research is, as part of that high school program, we had to do a senior project for our final year, and it actually was a research project where we had to go to the library and look up peer-reviewed journal articles and then do a tiny little project. And so I decided to look at body fat in young women and correlating it to their diet, and so I had a couple surveys, and then I had to do a body fat assessment on them using little calipers. So I chose 20 of my friends and then we had to write it up and present it.
And they were mad at you for checking that?
They told me they didn't want to know what their body fat was, and they didn't want to be identified.
Understandable.
And I had a nurse practitioner who helped me with it. So we assessed everybody's body fatness, and then we correlated it to their diet, and that was basically my project. So I had a tiny little bit of research before I got to college.
And that gave you that taste of it. Did you start to like it then, or were you still not sure that you liked research?
I got a taste for it. I didn't realize, I think at the time I didn't know you could have a career in research. I just felt like everybody who goes in for biology or nutrition or any biology field eventually goes to medical school. For some reason, it just never clicked with me that I could do research as a career. And so I thought it was fun, but I didn't realize that I could take it further until the end of college.
So was it then in high school that you first began to think about becoming a scientist, getting involved in science?
Well, actually, when I was in college as a sophomore, I got an invitation to this program called JIFSAN, which is the Joint Institute for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. And it's a joint partnership between the University of Maryland and the FDA, because the FDA is right there. Mm-hmm. And there's a group of scientists in the FDA that open up their labs to college students to come in and do research or help out with research projects. So you have to write a little cover letter, identify some of your interests. Mine was in nutrition, obviously, so I got put with this one group in the FDA. They were doing toxicology research. So this is in the few years post 9/11, and there was a lot of money from the Department of Defense to do research investigating areas where food safety was going to be an issue, or we had weaknesses in food safety. So this lab had money to do research on this critical issue of food safety, and their focus was actually the milk supply. So I kind of started getting involved in the research, and it just seemed like it was so important, because if you didn't protect the food supply, then the whole country could get sick.
Absolutely.
And it's not, my tiny little part of it seemed really tiny, but when you get data for the first time and you're like, oh my gosh, that actually worked, or we put all these chemicals in it and milk didn't amplify their toxicity. I mean, it just seems really intriguing. And he's like, you should go to grad school. If you like this, you should go to grad school. So
you said he. So was there any teachers that stand out in high school, or professors in college that seem to influence your track into science, influence you into looking in nutrition?
Well, he was definitely one. His name was Larry Garthoff, and he was a scientist at the FDA. And he was just so supportive. I mean, there was any questions I had about really anything, he was there to help me through it, and he really pushed me to go to grad school, but whatever I wanted to do, he would have been supportive of. And then I did have a couple professors that kind of reaffirmed that. I said, well, I'm thinking about grad school, and one of them specifically said to me that I asked too many questions to do anything but go to grad school.
Well, that's right. You have to have a lot of questions in front of you so that you have, stuff to do research.
Yeah.
That's very true. So would you consider some of these individuals your mentor?
Yeah, Larry Garthoff I definitely would consider a mentor. There have been times throughout, even though I left the FDA soon after I graduated, there have been plenty of times throughout being a graduate student that I've emailed him or called him and said, this is something that I'm struggling with, and he was always there to provide words of support. Basically tell me that he thought I was smart and I could do it.
So what do you think made him such an influential individual, such an important and successful mentor to you? So what makes a good mentor? Positive
reinforcement. I mean, that is key for a mentor. And I always felt like there was a difference between a mentor and an advisor. A lot of people, everybody has an advisor in graduate school, and their job is to get you through graduate school, advise you on how to do the science and how to do the steps, but there's so much more that goes on that I think you actually need a mentor for, and that's how to deal with work-life balance, how to deal with the stress of being a student, maybe how to resolve conflicts with other faculty members or other students. There's just so many things that go on that it seems like you need just a pair of ears and some wisdom and some positive encouragement, because you always need somebody to tell you that you're doing a good job, because sometimes your advisor's not telling you that. and if you never get positive reinforcement, then eventually you're just going to be turned off to science, be turned off to the learning process. You have to have positive reinforcement as well, and sometimes that only comes from a mentor. So.
And I think in this field, science, where you could be working on something for a long time and not get any results for a while, getting that positive reinforcement is key for that motivation to continue. As a postdoc where you're right now mentoring, I guess, yourself 3 master students.
Yeah.
Are you taking that advice and that, taking those little characteristics and applying them to how you're dealing with your master students?
I really try. I mean, I try to tell them that they're doing a good job. I mean, even when they make mistakes, or they're struggling so hard with trying to keep up with the classes that they take, trying to keep up with the to-do list, that they're doing the best they can, because everybody else around here is so stressed, and I feel like I'm the only person who's just hanging out. I have a job already. Like,
congratulations.
I leave in 8 weeks for my new job, and so I'm not really tied.
Where are you going?
Ohio State University.
Congrats. That's for another postdoc or
for a tenure track position.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. But that takes all the pressure off of me. Mm-hmm. I'm no longer interviewing for jobs. I'm no longer writing, reviewing my CV every 2 weeks. I have time to kind of sit back and reflect on what makes a good mentor, and I do try to provide them positive encouragement. Even when she put the wrong media on the cells and they died over the weekend, it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Try not to make it again. It's going to be okay. We'll just keep moving forward. We can go get some more cells.
So if one of your master students come up and just tells you that, wow, things are really stressed, I can't seem to manage everything, you know, I'm getting very overwhelmed.
They tell me that like every day.
Can you tell us what you would tell them, kind of like some advice, because this route that we are choosing is a stressful route.
It is.
It really is, especially if you want to continue into academia, because there are other steps to take. You know, if you're going to industry, you might get a position perhaps right after, you know, even undergrad or right after graduate school. Usually for academia, a postdoc might be important, and getting grants and publications.
It's a treadmill.
Yeah, there's so much to do. So what would you tell this very stressful young man or young woman who wants to pursue their career in science but just feels very overwhelmed in graduate school?
Science is a treadmill. The career in science is a treadmill, and almost everybody's chronically sick their first semester. Gradually throughout the first year, you learn to adapt to the level of things that are on your list. And really, it's just about learning how to prioritize. You know, what needs to be done by tomorrow, what needs to be done by next week, what needs to be done by the end of the semester. I keep lists. That's really how it works for me, is I have a running list and I have due dates on it, and then I prioritize by what needs to be done. And then if you feel like there just is too much on your plate and you can't handle it, then you need to address that with your superior, your direct superior. I mean, their boss is the one who tells them, you know, what has to be done. I'm there to help them learn how to do it. But if one of them just, you know, she's got gene expression and she's got protein analysis and she's got a test tomorrow and he wants data by next week, she needs to tell him, I have a test tomorrow that I need to study for, and then I will get to this part of it. But I think keeping those open lines of communication is important.
That is a wonderful piece of advice, because I think many individuals might be very intimidated by their advisor, and that may cause the communication between them not to be as open as it could possibly be, because of the possible, you know, that individual thinks that there'll be some repercussions if you tell your advisor, I'm sorry, I don't think I'll be able to do this due to the other workload that you've given me, plus the workload from the graduate school, you know, taking classes. So thank you very much for letting individuals know that when it comes to your advisors, communication is going to be key.
And on one little thing on top of that is, if you have an advisor who's been an advisor for 30 years, they might already have that mindset in place. They might already understand that a first semester student, because they've seen it 20 times throughout their career, struggles the first year to figure out how to do all of these things at the same time. But especially important with somebody who may be brand new, who, like me, has just learned how to adapt to this system and maybe has already forgotten those days of intense stress, that we need to be reminded that you're brand new, you don't know how to figure all this out, and it's taking you time, and you're getting sick every day. And I think that advisors and mentors that are very young should be aware of this, and maybe they also have an advisor who's maybe an older faculty member to talk to about, well, how do I teach my master's students and my first year PhD students how to adapt to the stress level? But as long as you're open about it and you talk to them, I think it'll make everything a lot easier.
So it's beneficial even for mentors to have a mentor themselves. And thank you for making that differentiation between a new faculty, like a new PI, compared to a PI that's been around for quite a while. I can imagine it slipping my mind that not so long ago was I in the same boat as that person and trying to deal with all this overwhelming feelings and deadlines and projects to do. So thank you for making that differentiation. I think our viewers are going to appreciate that. So we've talked about your mentors and how you're a mentor right now, and all the qualities that make a mentor. So I wonder then, what are the qualities that made you a successful graduate student, that maybe overall makes a successful graduate student? What allowed you to succeed in graduate school?
Oh, curiosity, I think, is the number one thing that probably made me successful, just because I wanted to know the answer. I always wanted to know the answer. My mother would say, because I'm driven, just never really wanting to give up on anything. But I think curiosity probably is the ultimate one. Later on, I took some classes on emotional intelligence and how to control all the stress that goes on in order to continue to have good communication with people that might be stressing you out. And that was probably the best experience of grad school, was getting to learn about emotional intelligence, because you come through and you're just so stressed all the time, and every time one little thing happens, you can, explode. And that happens, it seems, all the time. So learning how to control that, slow yourself down, think about things from somebody else's perspective is really important. So,
as a soon-to-be professor at Ohio State, and I'm assuming it's going to be in the nutrition department?
It's actually in animal science.
Animal science.
Yeah.
Would you recommend your students then to go out of their department and maybe take a class for their own personal fulfillment, to help them understand how to manage, their emotions, manage
Absolutely.
their feelings?
I actually already recommended it to all the master's students that I coach, and they offer it through the counseling center too. So they offer like a semester long. It's not even something you have to. It's not a course. You don't even have to get credit for it, but you can go and you talk like with a large group of students and one of the counselors, and they teach you about emotional intelligence, and you can practice interactions on other students. And I definitely recommend that for anybody, because this world is a very stressful place, and anytime you can learn how to balance your emotions and have healthy communications, that's going to help you in whatever career you choose. So
I definitely agree. So through this path, did you experience and had to overcome any challenges?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely challenges along the way. Probably just relating to my early PhD experience, my advisor actually left the university a year after I got here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we did all of my animal experiments in a year. Basically, that first summer before he left, we had finished 3 animal experiments, and so I had a freezer full of samples.
So do you recommend individuals, when they're applying to an advisor, making sure that they're going to be there for more than a year, that they're not they're in the brink of retirement, or...
I think you should have a good discussion with whoever's offering you a position about if they're planning on staying, if they're planning on leaving. Now, you can never you can never guess if somebody's going to get called and get offered an amazing position.
Absolutely.
It happens. It seems to happen once a year. Somebody gets a phone call from a company and they love their research. They're going to offer them $200,000 a year to go consult, and well, who can turn that down? If it's tripling your salary from being a faculty member, who's going to turn that down? But how are you going to keep working with that individual? And so in my case, I was lucky because there's a strong group of people here that were able to kind of take over the majority of my advising. I moved into a lab that was in dairy science, and my scientific advisor he said as long as I had tissue samples and blood samples, we could figure out the rest. He didn't have any horse experience, but he was willing to do all of the lab work with me as long as I came with money. And then I had a group of scientists in the vet school that had horse knowledge, and they were willing to work with me on the interpretation and maybe designing a 4th study if I wanted to. So I had a really strong network, but I had to build that myself.
And how did you go about doing that? I can just imagine myself in your shoes, and my advisor tells me that they're leaving, and all the things that are running in my head. Am I going to finish graduate school? How am I going to continue doing the research that I'm interested in? Do I have to leave myself? So what held you together, basically?
Well, my advisor who left me with like $50,000.
Oh, wow.
Which they called my dowry.
Okay.
So I had a pot of money that I could use to to do a proportion of my analysis.
And money talks.
Yeah, money talks. So that, I think, that was part of the deal. And having all of the actual analysis done, or all of the animal experiments done, that's a huge chunk of change. So all of that part was done. All I needed to do was some Western blots, some real-time PCR, and some blood analysis. But I mean, it was definitely a struggle because there was a while when I really didn't feel like I had a home anywhere. And I think for grad students, it's important to feel like you're kind of owned by somebody. Like, they take responsibility for you, they promote you, they defend you when you need to be defended. So I got stuck in a lot of situations where I didn't feel like I had anybody to defend me until I cornered my advisor and told him that he had to stick up for me because I was a student and nobody else was doing it. So, you know, getting handed extra TA assignments, you know, or just having my lab, the lab that I had been doing stuff in was getting reassigned to another professor. So I needed more lab space. Well, then I go down to his lab and there's no free lab bench. So, you know, in a normal lab, your advisor would come in and assign you a space to work, but I had to kind of fight for it, you know, and so I had to go to him and ask him to stick up for me and to find me spaces to work, and I just needed him to back me up because I needed to get my work done, but I also needed to do some TAing, but I didn't need to do so much that I couldn't get my work done. So that was kind of where there was a lot of miscommunications along the way and some fighting, but
so do you think some of that derived from, was he not used to working with somebody of your background, or was he new? Was he old?
He was new. I was his third student. He'd been here for a few years, so I think he was new to the system. He was new to this. I mean, he did his undergrad here, but he was new. And once we talked about it, things got a lot better. He realized, he probably didn't realize that that's what I needed because I wasn't telling him. But as soon as I told him that I needed for him to back me up, he was like, okay, no, I've got this. There's your space in the lab. You don't need to fight for it anymore.
Good.
So, all it was about communication.
So it seems like you struggled in graduate school because very early on you got, faced with this immense problem. Your advisor's leaving you, and then an advisor who wasn't as supportive is the word, or defensive of you. Anything else? Any other challenges or things that you had to kind of like struggle and overcome? Did you have? How did you manage your work life and your personal life? I think that's really important in graduate school because you need to allow some time for yourself.
Right.
It can't be all lab. Otherwise, well, that's probably one of the reasons you're feeling so overwhelmed.
Right. Well, I don't think I balanced my work life and my personal life until probably around the last year of my PhD. And I don't know why.
And how long did it take you to finish your PhD?
It was 3.5 years.
Well, that's short.
Yeah, although I had a master's.
Gotcha.
So that made it shorter, but I feel like I was really bad about it, and that probably created a lot of extra stress, and probably was one of the sole reasons that I had some bad communication skills early on, with the new advisor, with the old advisor, just because I was chronically stressed, and I just hadn't figured out how to take time for myself to go do something that, was not school related. But I did own a horse, actually, the entire time I was in grad school, and that helped a lot because I had to go out to the barn, I had to take care of my horse, kind of like a really large, expensive dog.
So
that was really helpful. There was a group of students that kept their horses at the same place that I kept my horse, and it's pretty cheap in Blacksburg. It's not that expensive. So So we would all go out to the barn and go trail riding together, and as long as we kind of pushed each other to get out there and do stuff, we got some time away from school. But early on, I don't think I was very good about it until I took that class on emotional intelligence. And then I realized that I really needed to, work my 8-hour day and then go do something else.
Something for yourself.
Something for yourself. But they push you so hard. I mean, they're constantly pushing you for more data, for more papers, and you're just running at light speed, trying to keep up with how much they want from you. And as long as you're producing, they feel like that's the level that you can keep producing at. And so you have to be the one to put the brakes on and say, I can do this, but physically over time I'm going to have a breakdown. So we need to back it down to some level that's acceptable.
So do you recommend students then taking, Saturday's my day, or would you recommend maybe like little chunks every day? What's your recommendation?
Well, when I was writing my dissertation, I set a goal for myself for every day, is probably the best example. And so I had an outline for my dissertation, and then I just set goals for what needed to be done by the end of this month. And then I kind of broke it down by weeks. And then when it was that week to get this done, I decided how much I was going to do on each day. And then when I was done with my day, I was done working. So
kind of making a contract with yourself.
I made a contract with myself. And so if it took me 8 hours to write, that one page that needed to get done that day, then it took 8 hours. And if it took 10 hours, it took 10 hours. But if it only took 6 hours, then I was done. And I went and did other things with my life, because you have to give yourself positive reinforcement as well. Give yourself some rewards along the way. So I'm probably a proponent of giving yourself chunks of rewards every day. And maybe it's, I worked my day and I'm going to go watch my favorite TV show, and then I'm going to go back and do some statistical analysis on my data. But I think you should give yourself a reward every day.
I do like that idea of making, a weekly contract. This is what needs to be done today. This is how much work I'm going to do on Monday, and after this, it is my time time to relax. I need to give my brain some time to refresh, so that I can come back and look at this with, a better eye.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you're just so focused on one thing for such a long time, you start to get blinders and not see things that if you just had a clear head, a clear mind, you would be able to pick up easily.
How many mistakes do you make when you're tired? All the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for discussing your time management and your challenges and your struggles. Any challenges and struggles early on in high school or...
there's always family issues. My brother's got schizophrenia, so kind of dealing with being supportive of my family and helping out with that, as well as continuing on with my education. There's always some family. Everybody, this is what you will learn when you become a mentor or you have a number of students. Every single student has something going on with their life. There's not a single student that has a perfect life. They all have something going on, and so you have to be accepting of their struggles and how they're handling it. My best friend, or one of my best friends, committed suicide a week before my senior year in college started.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was tough, and that whole semester was just a wash for me. I passed some classes, I barely passed some classes, and I had some good support and I had some crappy support. So, but having gone through that, I feel like when my students come to me and they say, I'm going through this right now, I have a better understanding of how it actually affects them, how they might not actually be able to concentrate, or how that's why they're sick all the time, or, it's really distracting to have a sick family member because your parents call you and they need to talk about it, or, you need to go visit somebody, or you need to, it's just very distracting, and that's life. That's the way life is, and you have to be accepting of it, because there's more to life than sitting behind a bench and pipetting and writing papers. At the end of the day, it's just a job. That's what I like to tell my students. It's a job you love, but at the end of the day, it's just a job, and your family is important too.
Well, definitely those are some tremendously hard events to struggle through, and you've definitely, you've made it. You're going to be at Ohio State. It was like, go Buckeyes. Correct?
Go Buckeyes.
And yeah, we all have these personal things that we bring to the bench, we bring to the table. And when it comes to things that are that personal, what do you think helped you overcome them? Do you think it was that a supportive system that helped you go through, or just the mindset that, I have to do this, but my family is important, my sanity is important?
I had a good support system. I feel like, I was always open to going to the counseling center when something was really stressful. I had really good friends that were just always there for me no matter what happened. And I was really lucky at finding professors that just seemed to get it, even if it was just one or two. And so I tell students that they need a mentor at every stage of their education.
And you found them. Correct?
Yeah, I found them. I don't know how, but I always found them. And they're the kind of people that you can stumble into their office crying, and they can help you compartmentalize it if it's something that can be compartmentalized, or can tell you, you need to go home. All the way home.
And I think this brings back to, once again, having that open communication with your advisor.
Right.
Like if, God forbid, something, personally happens, that you can come to your advisor and says, okay, this happened. I need to take a day off so I can visit this family member or something.
Yeah, and he always knew. He knew everything that happened. And sometimes he'd be like, I don't need to know the details. If you tell me that it's important and you have to go, then you just go. He's, I didn't even think that I would have had to call him. If I had sent him like a 2-line email, like I had to go home, there would be no questions asked, because he knew what was going on in my life. And he never asked questions about it, but he was very understanding of things, and that's important. So if you have a huge family drama that's going on, you can't necessarily just keep it to yourself. You have to tell your boss. Even if it's just small details. You don't want to tell them everything, that's fine, but you need to tell them that something important is going on.
And utilize the resources that you have around. Like, for instance, here at Virginia Tech, we have the Cook's Counseling Center.
Excellent counseling center.
It's amazing, They always have openings, so you can just go and talk.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a great stress reliever, just to talk. So using those resources. Thank you for mentioning that. And why don't we leave it with this imaginary scenario? Let's imagine that we've created this time machine, and we're going to go in this time machine, and we're going to go back to when you were thinking about going to graduate school. And if you could tell yourself, that young scholar, that young person that's going to go into graduate school, what would you tell yourself, to help you through going to graduate school, to help you through your path? Would there be something that you would tell yourself?
I'd probably say keep your chin up. There's so many tough things that happen, and there's so many times that you're going to hear something that you don't like, or that you found offensive, or you're just struggling with whatever, but you just have to kind of have a thick skin.
Because you're going to get criticism.
Right, you're going to get constructive criticism, and the first time you get it, you're going to think it's just criticism. So think before you speak. Slow down, breathe. Think about where somebody else is coming from before you respond. And keep your chin up and try to have a thick skin to the world. And just keep going.
Keep going. Have that motivation, have a thick skin. Yeah. In the end, it's worth it, right?
In the end, it's worth it. The 5 years down the 5 years of the road is sometimes you don't feel like it's worth it, but it's worth it at the end of the day. So, and you can't get through it.
Well, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
discussing your struggles and your challenges and your, path into becoming a new professor at Ohio State. That's, once again, congratulations
Thanks.
on that. Please keep us posted on your success there. And thank you for agreeing to do this interview.